Hey guys, this is episode 131 of Stand Up. Joining me today, Boston Globe columnist Michael Cohen, the Legal Eagle, Eric Segall, lawyer and legal commentator Midwin Charles, and for Father's Day I called up Chisel D and had him take me through a timeline of his life's injuries. We had good fun. I'm Pete Dominic. Stand up with me right now. Hello, friends, and happy Monday. Thank you very much for checking out the podcast today. Thank you to everybody who joined me on Friday night at the Zoom Hangout. We had almost 60 subscribers, and we had a great conversation, a lot of fun, a lot of laughs, and maybe even a few tears. It was great. Always love talking with you. If you're not a paid subscriber, now is the time to sign up. Go to the paid subscription link in the show notes and sign up for as little as $5 a month. I'd love to have you be a member of our community, hang out with us, talk about problems, offer solutions, learn more from each other, lean on each other, and just really have a great connection. It's been so exciting to build this community and really great when we get to hang out with you. I just got the commitment, don't have a date, but Dr. Aaron Carroll will be my next guest in one of those Zoom Hangouts where you'll get to ask him questions and see him and talk to him. The legendary Dr. Aaron Carroll will be my next special guest, so sign up for a paid subscription now. Also, happy summer solstice to you. Feels always a little anticlimactic as we ramp up to the longest day of the year, and then we start slowly losing daylight. But it was a great weekend, even though I hurt my back riding my bike, so I'm like lying on my back recording this right now. But I also had a great Father's Day. I mean, it's not serious, and I'll be fine. Don't worry about it. But I had a great Father's Day as well with the girls, and called my dad, and just feeling very fortunate. Very fortunate to have all of you listening and part of my life, and things going pretty well. So thank you so much for your support. I've got a lot to talk about on today's show. Of course, Corona-palooza, as I'm fond of calling it, the debacle that took place in Tulsa over the weekend, as well as the Friday night massacre with the Attorney General firing the state's attorney at the Southern District of New York. You probably heard about that. So we discuss those things and more with all of my guests today. Lots of news to unpack and to understand and to make a little bit of light fun of as well, because it's scary times, folks. Okay, let's get to my first guest. He is a columnist at the Boston Globe. Always love reading him. Great follow on Twitter, at SpeechBoy71. He's written 2 excellent books, both of which you should definitely buy. And I got to apologize on behalf of Michael Cohen for the loud rings that his phone makes twice during this interview. And I just couldn't edit him out because he was saying important things. So sorry about that. Hope it's not too shocking. All right, let's get to it right now on the podcast. Michael Cohen. There he is, Michael Cohen. Thank you very much for joining me and taking a few minutes of your Father's Day out to do it. Happy Father's Day to you. I know you're a great, great dad to your daughters.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Okay, there's a ton.
I know that you are as well. And I know that they obviously really appreciate you as a dad.
I'm sorry that I stepped on your return compliment. I apologize. Thank you. It was obligatory. It's the only reason I said good things about you. Okay, so... Okay. I got to get to your most recent column. I believe it's your most recent about John Bolton. But before we do, we've got to also talk about what happened over the weekend with what was being comically called, maybe you don't think it's funny, but Corona-palooza. The president went to Tulsa, Oklahoma, a state where he is safe in terms of his reelection, one would argue that word, and gave his first rally since the pandemic kind of outbreak began, since he gave his last, I should say. And he had made promises, as did his campaign manager, it'd be sold out, it'd be packed. And, of course, The story was that it wasn't. I want your take on all of that and everything else, really, about the speech.
So, first of all, the fact that it wasn't sold, that only 6,000 people showed up is obviously embarrassing to Trump. I mean, it's a good thing, I think, because it means that at least some people in Trump's camp recognize the dangers of being in a massive crowd during a pandemic. And so I think you have to sort of look at that positive element of it. The event, like I watched the entire speech and, the president is just not a well person. And, he told this story for about 12 minutes about walking down the ramp at West Point, which was intended to, push back on all the negative coverage he got about it. And as I'm watching it, I actually sort of just had this weird feeling where I kind of felt sorry for him. I mean, it was just sort of pathetic and sad, and he's just a horribly broken person. And, I know it's hard to have empathy for somebody who is as, repugnant as the president is, but there was something really, I just found sad about the entire event, that it was just happening so that he could build up his ego.
Yeah, I get it. I understand it. And I also have learned a lot about compassion, even for the worst people in the world. And trying to find that is a difficult exercise. And I should say it's easy for me to say, straight white guy. But, less to fear, maybe. I don't know if that matters. Okay, so, yeah, I mean, the other thing is, go ahead.
Yeah, but I think the bigger thing that came out of last night, to me, is the political kind of takeaway, which is that the president right now is losing. There's no question about that. I mean, double digits in some polls. I mean, I think the average in 538 is like 9 points. It's down to Biden. He needs to reverse that. And, what I saw last night was a president who doesn't understand how to do that and is not able to do it. And I think that's the biggest issue. I mean, the message that last night was pretty much geared exclusively toward his own supporters, right? I mean, it's all sort of immigrant bashing. It's all attacking protesters, even though the protests, around George Floyd, whose name he didn't mention, by the way, have majority support. And I think, that's a real problem for Trump. But I think beyond that, he also has shown that he has no real message for how he wants to attack Joe Biden. I mean, at one point he's a puppet of the far left. The other point, he's a creature of the DC establishment. I mean, he actually attacked him on racial issues, that he wasn't really that great for the black community, which is just, what is the point of that?
Right.
I mean,
yeah.
Who's going to believe that? And who's going to be influenced by that? I think at the end of the day, Trump's problem is that he has to find a way to convince voters who don't like him, and that's the majority of Americans, to support him. And nothing he did last night, in my view, achieved that goal. And I don't see any reason to believe that he's going to be able to change the current dynamics of this race, which has him losing badly.
And the other thing is, you only have just so many resources. Even Trump, you're going to want to campaign, to your point, in a state that you need to win, as opposed to a safe state. That seems like conventional wisdom. Do you think it's true?
Yes and no. I mean, look, I don't know that it mattered. Last night was really about just trying to get, him out on the campaign trail. And I think, obviously, if you're a Trump supporter in Michigan or Wisconsin, Arizona, you can watch what happened there. But look, what it is embarrassing. I mean, it looks embarrassing that you get 6,000 people in a state like Oklahoma where he's not any chance of losing. Right. It looks bad. It looks bad when your campaign manager says you have 1 million ticket requests, and it turns out that many of those came from teenagers on TikTok and Korean pop, which I didn't even know was a thing, really. I mean, I think it's an embarrassing day for the campaign. But I think if you look deeper, this is a campaign that has no idea how to run an effective race from 2020. And look, they're losing now. And I don't see reason, unless barring some unforeseen event, they're going to lose in November the way this is going.
Two quick things I want to just mention to get your take on, and we'll move on past the Coronapalooza speech, which was 90 minutes and not a mention of policy. That's number one. Nothing that he's touting, nothing that he wants to really get done. Just diatribes off, goes away from the speech so often. And two, as I was hearing you talk about the president giving the speech, and a lot of people talking about how good it makes him feel to have these rallies, if U2 or the Dave Matthews Band wanted to, they could go have concerts in outdoor arenas and make lots of money. But it would look bad for them PR-wise, and they're good people. They don't want to do that. They're rich already, etc. The president needing to do this in a closed arena looks bad, and he's not a band. He's the leader of the free world.
It doesn't look bad. It is bad. It's awful. And I mean, you're going to look, you have 6 of his staffers who apparently tested positive for it, of his advanced staff. I would imagine it seems likely, more likely than not, that somebody who went to that rally last night or someone close to someone at that rally last night is going to die from coronavirus. I mean, the chances of people getting sick from that event are very high. And he doesn't seem to care. And no one around him seems to care. But one thing about that I think is really interesting. Go ahead. If you watched that rally last night for 90 minutes, it was like a Castro-like speech, Khrushchev-like speech. He didn't mention anything about the 120,000 Americans who have died from coronavirus. Not one.
Oh, really?
Didn't mention it. All he talked about was that he slowed down testing, which is ridiculous. He said basically it's just the numbers were padded. But I think most of all, he offered no path forward. There's no sense from him of how he's going to deal with this issue. Right. You see, yesterday was I think the highest number of cases since May 1st. right? It's spiking in Arizona, in Texas, and Florida. Where's the indication that Trump understands this and has to deal with it? His way of dealing with it is dying as happening. That is not an effective strategy. People want to hear what your solution is. He doesn't have one. That's a problem.
Yeah, I think that's all really good points, of course. Michael Cohen, your most recent column, I think, from the 19th at the Boston Globe. John Bolton's book is a parable for the Trump era. The former national security advisor exemplifies our national moment by exposing more of the president's corruption and by trying to cash in on it. This is a really important, good piece. I'm glad that you wrote about John Bolton this week. You savage him. You give us a bit of a record of what he's been responsible for, as well as what he was oversaw and overlooked while he was there. And I think it's really important that you make mention of a lot of this stuff. It isn't surprising that it happened, but he gives us evidence that it did. And I just want to mention, I think the most important thing that we learned, and you write in the column, is if any other commander-in-chief had allegedly told the Chinese president that he applauded his country's decision to build concentration camps to intern Uyghur Muslims, it would be a national scandal. In Trump's America, it was Wednesday. And what you put in this column, I had no idea, is that revelation came on the same day the president signed the Uyghur Human Rights Policy Act sanctioning China for its treatment of the Uyghurs. So in one side of his mouth, he's telling the Chinese it's okay. And the other side, he's sanctioning them publicly. This is so important that we learn this.
It is. And look, but I also think, in a way, are you at all surprised by it?
I'm not surprised, but it adds to basically, and I'm sure you won't like this, but I tweeted, he's a Nazi. He's acting like a Nazi in so many ways, but sanctioning and endorsing or looking the other way on concentration camps is pretty Hitler-esque.
Well, he didn't just look the other way. He basically said he thought it was a good idea.
Or even worse.
Even worse. It's appalling.
And he used the Nazi symbol. There's a lot of Nazi stuff happening, sir. I'm sorry.
He is, look, I think one diagnosis of the president that he's a sociopath. I mean, he doesn't have compassion, doesn't have empathy. He's an extreme narcissist. I mean, he's never shown any concern for human rights ever. So this is not like a huge shock that he said something like this. I mean, as stunning as it is to hear from the president, it's not in any way surprising, and I think that's what's so upsetting about this, that we're not surprised. To find out doesn't know that Finland's an independent country. Is anyone really surprised by that? Is anyone surprised he doesn't know that Britain's a nuclear power? I mean, I sort of figured he didn't know that. It's just one more confirmation that he shouldn't be president, period. And that he's hopelessly corrupt. I mean, the thing that Bolton also says is he basically not only confirms the Ukraine story over which Trump was impeached. Right. He says there's actually more things he's done that are wrong. Right. Things that he asked China to basically buy soybeans to help him win re-election in farm states. That he apparently told Erdogan in Turkey that he would kill an investigation of him that was in the Southern District of New York. I mean, this is a man who does not have any understanding of the basic principles of American democracy. I mean, it's appalling. And Bolton, but Bolton is such a hypocrite. He could have at any point earlier made this clear to the American people. He could have gone to Congress and testified. He could have done a press conference. He could have got up and said all these things. He waited to put his book out before he said any of it. I mean, it's disgusting, frankly.
You mentioned in this column about Lieutenant Vindman and how he was there for all of that, even as former members of his National Security Council staff, Bolton's, were being smeared by Trump and his allies in the case of Lieutenant Colonel Eugene Vindman, fired from his job in the council. Bolton said nothing publicly. In an era defined by moral cowardice of conservatives, Michael, you're right, Bolton's cravenness and corruption still stands out. That's a great point about that moment that he oversaw.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't just Vindman. It was Fiona Hill. It was Marie Yovanovitch. It was all. I mean, Fiona Hill was on the staff at the NSC. She got attacked by Trump and by other people. I mean, he basically sat there and let his own staffers and people that he knew were doing the right and honest thing by testifying and didn't say anything to defend them. And, it's gross. And frankly, it's also gross that he could have testified to the Senate. He said he would testify to the Senate, and the Republicans there didn't ask him to do it. They didn't want to hear this. They didn't want to know how bad Trump really is. And I think it tells you all you need to know about how, the political moment that we live in and why we are here, right? Why Trump is enabled, who enables him, and how he's gotten away with it. Because the Republicans, you have people like Bolton who'd rather make a buck than do the right thing. And you have people like Senate Republicans who'd rather say nothing than actually speak out against the president who violating every single democratic norm that we have.
Two more questions for Michael Cohen. One is about the protests, according to your Twitter feed, and you have to follow. I mean, I go to your Twitter feed every day like it's one of my news sources because I just love the things that you say and that you share. At SpeechBoy71, apparently, when it comes to vandalism of statues, you draw the line at Ulysses S. Grant. Why?
I actually draw probably at Washington and Jefferson too, but Ulysses S. Grant, of all people to tear down a statue, he is not the person to tear down a statue. This was a man, who won the Civil War, one of the greatest generals in U.S. history. But I think this is an important point. This is a guy who people argue that he had a brief period where he owned slaves when he married. He, after a year or so, he basically thought it was repugnant and sold slaves. This is somebody who actually, as a general during the Vicksburg campaign, enacted a proclamation of some sort that was incredibly anti-Semitic. And years later, he apologized for it. Years later, he actually hired his first president to visit a synagogue. He actually hired Jewish cabinet members. This is a guy who I think you can look at as an exemplar of someone who changed, who transformed himself, who became much more racially sensitive than he was in his younger days. And that's the kind of thing that we should be applauding, not, tearing him down because of the fact that he owned slaves for a brief period of time. He acknowledged that he was wrong to do that. And I just think that, look, it's a statue. There's going to be excesses. I get that. Not everyone understands history. Fine. But, I think it's important to recognize that every historical figure is flawed in some way. Okay. I mean, I revere Franklin Roosevelt. He did nothing on civil rights as president, not nothing, but very little on civil rights as president in order to appease Southern Democrats. He really didn't make an effort to bomb the train lines to Auschwitz during World War II, which many Jewish organizations asked him to do. He wasn't perfect, right? He basically agreed to letting the Japanese Americans be housed in concentration camps in California. Right. Nobody is perfect. Lincoln wasn't perfect, and we should recognize the imperfections of our leaders and not expect them to be, pure and honest, 100% good, because they're not.
What was that horrible noise? Is there a fire alarm?
No, that was my email ping.
Oh my God, that was unbelievable. That sound for like a deaf person. You make a lot of good points about FDR, and there's really, I bet you couldn't say a similar list of criticisms, however, of Tom Hanks or Fred Rogers or Harriet Tubman. Want to try? All right, moving on.
Tom Hanks didn't make The Terminal, which is a terrible movie. So I think, criticism is fair game on that one.
Well, I hope you won't say anything about Mr. Rogers or Harriet Tubman, or I think our relationship.
Mr. Rogers is basically, you can't say bad Mr. Rogers.
You ever see his name trending and go, no, he's already dead. It must be something horrible that he's just
been. Documentary came out that when I heard about it, I'm like, I don't want to see it. It's going to be all about how he was like a terrible person, and of course, it did about he was a great person. So I was
great guy.
But I was fearful that it was going to like deconstruct, Mr. Rogers.
All right, final question about something really important that happened over the weekend, and I'll be talking with others about that today on this episode. But I got to get your take on it, Michael Cohen. What you're calling on Twitter the Shabbat massacre, actually, which is funny.
Oh, thank you. I was bummed that wasn't trending, but it is what it is.
Friday night, a crazy thing happened. The Attorney General of the United States fired the what is it? District Attorney from U.S.
Attorney for the Southern District of New York.
Excuse me, who was investigating the president and a lot of his people who worked with him, including Giuliani. It looks horrific, and now people are calling for clear violations, that there should be an impeachment of the Attorney General Bill Barr for this. What do we need to know about this? What is your take on what you call, because they couldn't even do a Saturday Night Massacre, the Shabbat Massacre?
Look, the one thing I'm struck by this whole story is that Barr, two things. Bill Barr puts out a press release saying that Jeffrey Berman, the U.S. attorney, resigned, when in fact he refused to resign. So right there, that is a pretty naked lie by the attorney general about about Jeffrey Berman, one that was exposed pretty quickly. The second thing is he didn't even offer an explanation as to why Berman was fired. I mean, at least give me like a fig leaf of some reason why. But I think it's pretty clear he was fired because he's investigating the president and the president's cronies. I mean, if there's another explanation, I don't know what it is. And I think what you also see is that Barr just screwed this up royally, right? I mean, tries to fire the guy, doesn't work. Tries to put in a Trump supporter in the job. That doesn't work. Now it's the assistant to Berman, who almost certainly will continue the cases that he's investigating. And now Berman's going to testify on the Hill on Wednesday. And there's no way to stop him because he resigned. I mean, look.
He's testifying on the Hill this Wednesday?
Yeah, Wednesday. Yeah, Nadler called him. He's testifying.
Wow.
So
that's going to be highly anticipated then, right? I
would think so. I'm looking forward to it. I think of a situation in which, Barr is hopelessly corrupt. He is hopelessly politicized the Department of Justice. He should be impeached. And he's also not terribly bright, frankly. But look, how many times has he lied to defend the president? He lied about the Mueller report, the whole Flynn investigation, the whole trying to drop the case, Roger Stone. I mean, it's over and over again. You see basically Bill Barr playing the role of Trump's lawyer. He's supposed to be the Attorney General of the United States, not Trump's lawyer, and that's what he's doing. And it's appalling. And it's one more example of how this administration just erodes our democratic norms and the rule of law on a daily basis. I mean, it's just one more story after another.
At SpeechBoy71, I appreciate some of your time today. Go read him at the Boston Globe, subscribe to the Boston Globe, and subscribe to his weekly newsletter, Truth and Consequences. It's always great catching up with you, getting your analysis and commentary on the most important issues of the week and in the world. Michael, thank you.
Always a pleasure, my friend.
Yes, Michael Cohen. Always like talking to Michael Cohen. Read him and follow him and tell him you heard him here on the podcast and thank him for joining me. He's a great writer and journalist and also a great dad. He really is. We've become pretty close, and he has got 2 daughters. He's a very dedicated dad, and I really like him personally as well as his writing and thoughts on things. All right, so doesn't mean I agree with him, by the way, or any of my guests fully, and I need to get more dissenting voices on the show. I know. Always interested in who you'd like to hear me have join the conversation. But speaking of parenting, another guy who has been really a role model for me as a husband and as a girl dad, father of daughters. He's got 3, I've got 2, is my next guest, Eric Segall. He is, of course, a constitutional law scholar at Georgia State University. He's the author of a couple of really good books, both of which you should buy. If you're looking for a good summer book, I love Supreme Myths. His second book is Originalism is Faith, and they're both great. And you should buy them. You've heard them a lot of times here. If you haven't bought those books, I think you'd really like them. And reach out to him and thank him for joining me. We had a great conversation. We talked about being dads. We talked also, of course, about last week's Supreme Court decisions and the Friday Night Massacre and more. Here is today's conversation with Professor Eric Segall on Twitter at eSpinSegall. Now. Okay, here he is now, your favorite, Eric Segall, the Legal Eagle, joining me, and I have a lot to talk with you about. And I was just talking to Michael Cohen about Bill Barr, what he's calling the Shabbat massacre, because it happened on a Friday and not a Saturday. But nonetheless, Friday night, Eric Segall, what happened? How do you see what happened on Friday night between President Trump's Attorney General Bill Barr, who you are a huge fan of, and the firing of this SDNY attorney?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, of course, we don't know the inside story. We may not ever. What it appears to be. Shouldn't there have been a public reason given, or we are left to speculate? Isn't the president giving a reason why you fired somebody out of? So I think your listeners or viewers or whoever's listening and watching this need to understand something that I don't think is public enough. I spent 4 years at DOJ. And one of the big cases I worked on, we tried to close the PLO observer mission to the United Nations. It was a big international case with international complications. We worked very closely with the Southern District of New York, which is the U.S. Attorney's Office at issue on Friday night. In fact, we worked with Rudy Giuliani, who at the time was the U.S. Attorney. And what people need to understand, and I cannot emphasize this enough, there are, in every big city, there's a U.S. Attorney's Office. Chicago, L.A., Atlanta, Boston, every city. The Southern District of New York is unique. It's not different. It's unique. Those words have different meanings. Okay. It is the first among equals, and it has a long tradition in terms of organized crime investigations, political investigations, a long tradition of being more apolitical than most, stronger than most, and more independent. It is very important who the U.S. attorney is in the Southern District of New York. So in that sense, yes, the American public deserves more information than it got on Friday or this morning. If this were the Central District of California or the Northern District of Georgia, where I live, it's important, but it's not the Southern District of New York. Now, having said all that, the other thing is there's a lot of stuff going on with Epstein and with Deutsche Bank and with all of these potential scandals, circling around Trump, that makes Barr's activities on Friday more suspicious than they would otherwise be. That's just the reality. And then we have Barr himself. So my understanding is that Berman, who he fired, and this woman who was replacing him, who I think will be fired next week, probably, both worked on the Iran-Contra investigation for Republican Lawrence Walsh. I litigated against those people when I was at the Department of Justice. I told people who listened to you before, I worked on Iran-Contra for the Bush administration, the first Bush.
Right.
That team of lawyers, Lawrence Walsh, a guy named Craig Gillian, who's now in Atlanta, and all those people, ethical, high-performing lawyers who cared about the rule of law. Bill Barr's public participation in George Bush's decision to pardon Caspar Weinberger, the Secretary of Defense, and 3 or 4 other high-level ranking officials, was called in the official report. This is not Segall talking out of his knowledge. Nothing to do with that. This is Lawrence Walsh's official Iran-Contra report.
Right.
Called those pardons part of the greatest and highest level cover-up of executive branch illegality in American history. But that's not even the end game. The end point is Barr is proud of his work convincing Bush to pardon those people. To this day, he's been quoted as saying that it was a good thing to do. It was the right thing to do. It was the wrong thing to do.
Right.
By any standard. And so this is the guy we're dealing with. So he does not deserve this very nerdy con law list you make fun of me for being on. Big discussion last night. And the bottom line is Republicans and Democrats alike, most, not all, most, don't think Barr deserves any presumption of good faith. So whatever's going on in New York is probably really bad.
Presumption of good faith surrounding, I know what you're talking about, but surrounding assumptions about why he made the decision to fire the U.S. attorney.
Especially because the U.S. attorney, who was a Trump supporter and is a Republican, my understanding, is by all accounts a good man with ethics and integrity. So why is he being fired now?
Right. Will we find out?
I don't know.
Won't he have to? He is going up. Berman is testifying this week, I just found out.
Where? I don't know this.
I believe in front of a House committee. Michael Cohen just told me that. And so, I mean, we're going. Why are you acting like it might stay private? It might stay.
Well, so Pete, I mean, nothing is normal. Nothing has been normal for.
Well, yeah.
So when I work, I just want people to understand everybody knows, progressive Democrat who worked for a Republican administration for 4 years at the Department of Justice, and just very luckily got involved in 5 or 6 high-profile political cases where I dealt with not just the career people there, who are all great, but the politicos. Like, for example, I've told you before, at one point I was bouncing between the White House and the politicos at the Department of Justice. Janet Rehnquist, the daughter of William Rehnquist, the Chief Justice, was at the White House Attorney's Office, and Brent Hatch, Orrin Hatch's son, was my political person at the Department of Justice. So,
pretty Mormon.
Justice Rehnquist is not one of my idols by any means. I'm not particularly fond of Orrin Hatch. I wasn't particularly fond of the daughter or the son. But Pete, they had a view of the Department of Justice that we had an obligation of integrity to the American people.
Right.
Doesn't mean there weren't political decisions made. Of course there were. But there was some notion of integrity. And I found that so refreshing being on the other side of the political spectrum, and they respected me. Like we would, we disagree about that. They got to choose, but they would hear me out and we'd debate. And it was all with this background of the Department of Justice is different. I don't think that's true anymore.
Well, I don't know much, but I do know that in the Bush administration, there was, when I really started paying close attention to politics after the election of 2000, for sure, there was always this kind of accusation or concern that somehow the White House was influencing his attorney generals, whose names are escaping me: John Ashcroft, Mullen, and the other guy who I think was Hispanic, whose name I'm forgetting. Nonetheless, there were all these questions about potential interference, but the White House could be influencing the Department of Justice. My understanding was that was a terrible thing to be seen doing, that there was supposed to be a real separation. And of course, during the Obama administration, I remember Obama himself making a point and making speeches and comments about how the White House should never influencing DOJ. And then the worst thing that was ever done in the history of politics was when Bill Clinton went on the plane of the then Secretary of State and had a chat with that woman. And it did look bad when Hillary Clinton was running. But my God, this attorney general and his relationship with this White House does seem different than everything I just said.
But let's be clear, that what you said is just a little bit overstated. The attorney general works for the president of the United States, period, full stop. And, forever, the idea is the Department of Justice has a twofold mission: to do justice, prosecute the laws, defend the United States government, and to serve the president. But that's serving the president. So I represented federal agencies, and I met with a lot of high-ranking political officials. The relationship between HHS and the president, between HUD, I had a lot of HUD cases, between HUD and the president is different. The attorney general is supposed to be a little bit more independent and a little more devoted to the American people than just your normal. Now, having said that, Democrats and Republicans alike, the president does get to. So you asked me, we're going to find out why Berman was fired. I'm not. In a normal time, I would say no, because the president gets to decide that. The attorney general does serve at the pleasure of the president. It's not like the FBI director who has a fixed term and is different. The attorney general serves at the pleasure of the president and is supposed to represent the president's interests. The problem is, I think Barr's perspective on this is 90% political and 10% legal, whereas most attorney generals have a 70% political and 30% legal, or something like that. And I said when he was nominated that this is a man who should be disqualified from public office forever for his role in the Iran-Contra controversy.
Bill Barr, yeah. Well, would you then agree with this tweet from former New York Times columnist and editorial writer Clyde Haberman? Are you familiar with him? He writes, John Mitchell as Attorney General was really bad. So were Ed Meese, Alberto Gonzales, and Michael McCasey. But congratulations, William Barr. You, sir, are the winner. The most disgraceful U.S. Attorney General in my lifetime. Would you agree with that? Who's worse, John Mitchell or Bill Barr?
I think Barr. I don't know. I think Barr is worse. I do want to say I worked for Ed Meese for a very short period of time. I'm not a fan of Ed Meese because he brought evangelicals into our lives, but he did. But he did nothing as Attorney General that was illegal, unethical. John Mitchell went to prison, and Bill Barr probably should. But John Mitchell went to prison, so I wouldn't put Ed Meese in that category. And I am not an Ed Meese fan. Everybody knows that. But
all right. Well, we talked last week about Supreme Court decisions on guns and that they wouldn't take up these cases, several cases, as well as the LGBT job discrimination case. We have not talked since Thursday when new decisions were announced. So I wanted to get your take on that. And these ones, of course, were that the Trump administration way overshot when it came to DACA.
Yeah. You're not going to like my answer to that.
There's a lot of answers of yours I don't like, including when are you going to get a haircut?
I want one so badly, Pete. So badly.
Cut it yourself. What's wrong with you?
Do it myself. Is that what you said?
That's exactly what I said.
You want me to get divorced? That's what you're saying.
Fair enough.
The DACA case is complicated, much more complicated than the press made it out to be. I think I can oversimplify. I think I can simplify it very quickly. President Obama signed DACA into law. And there was a controversy over whether that was legal or not. The Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, for better or worse, said it was illegal. And then the Supreme Court deadlocked 4-4 on that, which meant the Court of Appeals decision was the final one. That was when Scalia died, and those 8 judges. So then Trump comes into government and says, look, what that president did was illegal, so I'm going to stop it. And that's what his official thing was. They said it was illegal. I'm going to stop it. On Thursday, the court said that wasn't a good enough explanation for stopping it. But what the court didn't address was whether what Obama did was legal or not. But if what Obama did was illegal, then why can't a future president say, no, I'm not going to do it? So my criticism of the court decision is that it didn't address the big issue in the case. Now, having said that, on the ground, in real life, millions of people benefited from the Supreme Court's decision. That's more important.
Right. At least temporarily.
At least temporarily, yes. But right. I mean, just today, because I think the Supreme Court gets stuff wrong all the time. So when it gets it wrong and the good guys win, that's better than getting it wrong and the bad guys win. That's my feeling.
I only realize now that I wanted to have you read from your most recent piece at Dorf on Law, and knowing that you're a Luddite, you're not going to be able to pull it up that fast. Can I read, even though sure. you'd be as good, if not better, at performing your own words, even though I'm a great performer?
You're a better performer than I.
All right. This is a great piece. It's getting a lot of attention, and as it should. It's titled American Racism as an American Institution. And you write, racism is as American as apple pie. It is built into our institutions, our neighborhoods, our courts, our workplaces, and our schools. The social, legal, and economic consequences of racism dominated our politics in 1787, 1868, 1964, and are still with us today. The way forward isn't easy, but one thing is perfectly clear. American racism is an American institution. Until we fully accept the tragic reality and stop pretending that racism only haunts us around the edges, a demonstrably false proposition, real progress will be impossible. I almost nailed that read. Nonetheless, you back this up.
Did I really write that? That sounded pretty good.
Pretty good. You back this up with a number of details that American racism is an American institution. Do you want to share a few? Do you want to expand on this while we're talking? Everybody should read this whole thing. Thanks for the plug. In virtually every area of American life, African Americans have been and are treated poorly. And the key part of that article, Pete, is that I go through what the federal government did in the 40s and 30s that still haunts us today. It's not about slavery, not about segregation in the South, which, by the way, was around during my lifetime. And I'm old, but I'm not that old. So we're not talking Civil War here. When I was 6 years old, a hotel 2 blocks from my law school right now went to the Supreme Court and said, we have the right to keep African Americans out of our rooms. When I was 6. But the real key thing are the policies adopted by the New Deal, by FDR, by the New Deal. Right.
The federal government spent $120 billion on home mortgages, supporting home mortgages, backing home mortgages. 98% went to whites. That's how American suburbs were built. That's how New York suburbs, where I grew up, were built, California suburbs and all that. Those houses appreciated a lot. That money was then left to the children of those people. And 98% went to white people. That still haunts us today.
Yes.
Unions got protection. The Supreme Court hated unions, not surprisingly, from 1900 to 1930. And the Supreme Court tore down all protections for workers and unions. Then the Supreme Court changed, and we had all these union protections that raised the wages of factory workers throughout the country, gave them job security, made their job places safer. Unions were allowed to exclude non-whites for 40 more years. Into the 1960s. That does not get wiped away in 30, 40 years. That economic impact is devastating, which is why African-American wealth as a percentage of white wealth, Pete, has not changed.
I was talking to a friend of mine last week who's a black guy named Tarek. He listens to the show. Hey, Tarek. And he basically was saying about how he got in an argument with a guy at work, I think it was a white guy, And the guy was talking about, how well he's doing or something. And Tarek has said this. He said a number of times throughout his life, he's like, do you know how much better I'd be doing if I had the same head start and advantages that you have had? Like, he was commenting on all of these things that you're talking about, home ownership, access to good paying jobs and so on, that become, I think what you're saying, legacies. They get handed down, and they are no small thing. Not only you're talking about housing and jobs, but colleges, getting into elite colleges and getting scholarships. If your last name is Dominic or Segall because your parents went, mine didn't. You are actually an elitist. I think your dad went to college. But
I own that. I own it.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's just that your piece here, evidenced from a guy who listens to this show, I think is cool. Based on his own life and how he sees things and having to do so much more to get so much less. So
what makes me crazy, real quick, what makes me crazy, Pete, are academics and intellectual conservatives and Republicans
who don't get that,
who think that neutral policies can wipe away the legacy of these intentional formal.
If we create a new policy that says everybody is equal, everybody gets the same opportunity, which, by the way, isn't happening anyway, because that doesn't really exist. But even if we did, it still wouldn't matter because we have we have 5 generations of catching up to do. That's
the key point. And so Supreme Court is absolutely, even before for 50 years, the Supreme Court has pretty much believed formal equality is enough. As long as there's no illegality on the face of the law, which today there isn't. We don't have laws today that separate whites from blacks, and we don't do that anymore. They think that's enough. It's not enough. It's not even close to enough. And that's the point of that piece. It's not enough.
Finally, maybe. I just want to get your take. I feel like you were paying attention to Coronapalooza over the weekend. Weren't you? The president's speech in Tulsa? Weren't you commenting on it?
I was on Twitter and stuff.
Do you have anything to say on the podcast about that spectacle?
Yeah, I said on Twitter this morning, I based on what I saw, secondhand, third hand, it feels like that we're moving from evil, pathetic Trump to pathetic, evil Trump. Those are two different things. He looked really pathetic last night from what I saw. And that actually scares me in a way more because it makes me think the evil people like Steve Miller and Barr, who are much more competent than Trump, may play a bigger role. So circling back, Pete, to Friday night, I think what happened was Barr decided to fire this guy. He tried. It then became clear he couldn't. He had to have the president fire him. So then he wrote a letter saying the president fired him. The president denied it, which is really embarrassing, right? That happened all in 5 minutes. NBC News reports a letter was sent to Berman from the president saying you're fired. And the president says, I didn't do that. Talk to Barr. I bet Barr didn't even talk to Trump. I bet he did it all by himself. I don't know, but I bet he did it all by himself. That's scarier to me.
Right. Because, he's giving him cover without even being told to.
Yes.
Yeah. That looks very bad. Okay, before we go, I want to talk about being dads. It's Father's Day here today, even though this won't post till Monday. We're done pretending like last time. And I want to talk with you because
Wednesday, right? It's Wednesday.
It's 2025. We're all droids and living on a different planet. I want to talk with you about it specifically because you have been a really good mentor and role model. For me, you're a little bit older, and you're the father of 3 daughters. And also, you are the father of a daughter from a previous marriage, which makes her older in her, 20s, Jessie is. And
29.
It's 20. Is she really? 29. And Katie and Sarah, your other daughters, are
12 and 11.
But what that's always given me, and obviously you, a perspective in terms of raising girls, and you had this experience with your first daughter to learn from with your second daughter. I want to talk about that, but before I do, I also know that you hold your own father in high regard, and let's start with a tweet that you shared on Father's Day that reads, "My dad once told me, no matter how talented or successful you are, and he is both extremely talented and successful, there will always be people less and more so. Always. I love my dad." That's what you wrote. Specifically, why does that quote resonate so much with you, and anything else you want to say about your pop, who's still with us?
Yeah, my dad's 92, and he is 99% there. I mean, it's amazing. I mean, I'm 30% there when I'm 92. I'll be happy.
Yeah, same.
So the reason I tweeted that this morning, and I've been thinking about it all day, really, is I think with children, all you can do is drop morsels along the way and hope that cumulatively they add up to something that makes a positive difference later on. Because, Pete, I'm a big believer they are who they are and they is who they is. And so my dad was really a very successful businessman. And
in that you mean, by the way, you're a big believer in nature, not nurture. Is that what you mean?
Absent trauma, yes.
I don't know that I fully agree with that, but that's an age-old parenting argument. I interrupted you. You were saying your dad.
I'm very, very, very lucky that my dad was able to say this to me at a very early age. Do what you love to do. Find a job that you have passion for. And if you make a lot of money, great. If you don't make a lot of money, then I have enough money to make sure you can live at least a decent lifestyle. So it's my gift to you that I want you to do. Now, he knew I was motivated anyway, and, but still, I want my kids to feel that way, not the financial part. I want them to understand that work, if they decide to work, it's supposed to, be a house and raise kids, that kind of work. I want them to have passion for what they do because life is too short not to. Well, and my dad built that into me at an early age.
My dad did the same for me. It's interesting because my dad owned his own business, but I remember him saying, I don't care what you do as long as you enjoy it. And even though my dad was conservative, fiscally, like he didn't spend a lot of money on things other than like bikes and cars. But, a lot of things we wanted, they were either used or he tried to build them, which usually didn't work. But the point being, he paid for my acting school. It wasn't even accredited. And he paid for it. It was like $10,000, but still, that's a lot of money.
You went to acting school?
After 2 years of college, yep, which he also paid for. But that was college and it was accredited. But the point is, he said, I just want you and your brother to find jobs that you enjoy doing. And because my dad, even though he owned his own business, he did not like being an insurance salesman necessarily. All that being said, you think about our kids today and the opportunities that they have and the jobs that they have. And I wonder if you worry at all that they'll have the same type of opportunities to pursue their passions and how much it will matter.
I don't know. I see, having been a parent now for almost 30 years and parenting through two very different generations, because believe me, there's a huge difference between today and 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. I think all I want my kids to know is A, I'll love them no matter what. Not every day, but I'll love them no matter what. B, I want them to find their destiny as much as they can that suits them. Don't follow my destiny. Don't do things because you think I want you to do them. I want you to do what motivates you. And so my dad was a businessman who most of his life, he ended up in academics a little bit, but he was a businessman. I never cared about business, Pete, not for 1 second.
Right.
It never wanted to go to business. That my dad was like, that's great. That's not who you are. You go do who you are. I think a lot of parents, especially parents of my generation, want their kids to follow in their footsteps. That cliche, I think that's terrible. I don't want them to. I want them to choose their footsteps.
I think it's weird that you named both your daughters, all three of them, Eric Segall, the third, second, and fourth.
The other thing about my dad, and this is really important, is he changed a lot over the years. And so I want my kids to know that I'm capable of change and that everybody is capable of change. And change is scary and bad and scary and good, but it's possible. I see my dad today very differently than I saw him 30 years ago. That's on me, maybe, but I want my kids to be receptive to that for everybody. People evolve and change.
Before we go, what, if any, advice do you think there is for fathers of daughters? You and I have talked a lot about raising daughters. Like I said already, you've given me a lot of great advice and taught me about, the kind of role that we should play as men in our daughters' lives. Is there anything specific that you would share with other men raising daughters in 2020?
Maybe one thing, and we've talked about it before. It's not an answer to anything. It's more every day or, almost every day, there's a parenting moment where you see your child doing something and they could be 3 or 29. And you want to help them. you want to give them guidance and advice, and you want to give them the benefit of your wisdom. I think more often than not, that's probably wrong. I mean, sometimes it's right, obviously.
Even if you're someone like me with so much wisdom.
Even if you're like you're the best dad who's ever lived.
Right.
Sometimes being the best parent is not being a parent.
BDEL. That's me.
Or being a parent passively, I should say. But I'm not saying what the right answer to that is. What I'm saying is be reflective about it. Don't just swoop in.
That's genderless advice.
Yes. As for daughters specifically, Pete, I don't think if you ask Lynn that question, I know what her answer is.
What is it?
And I can't speak to it, but she can. And
Lynn, your wife, in case people don't know. Yeah.
What she says to my girls is, you own your body and you make your decisions about your body, and you never, ever let anybody either shame you, make you feel bad, guilt you into anything about your body that you don't want to do.
Including a full body tattoo. You're not going to say a thing. You have no say in that.
I think the advice Lynn gives is really, really.
I like it.
It sounds easy, Pete, but for 17-year-old girls, girls, not easy.
No, I like it. I think that's good. I should be interviewing her.
Yes, on that point, you should.
As always, I appreciate your time, pal. Thank you so much.
I want to say something. You always compliment my parenting, and I appreciate that a lot. I've made a lot of mistakes. People should know how devoted you are to that, and that you've spent a good part of your personal and professional career thinking about what good parenting is. At the end of the day, that's all we can do. We're flawed humans. But if we try our best, then we did our best. You've always tried your best to be a good dad. Wait, shut up. You have always tried your best to be the best father you can be. And I think that is part of who you are and part of your amazing charm and part of why I love you.
Oh, thank you very much, pal. That's very kind of you. Happy Father's Day to you. And I learned it by watching you. Everything I've done in my life, I just found people who are good at it. And it includes parenting, specifically being a dad to girls and just saying, let's see what that guy's doing that's working or not working. Yeah. And I reach out to a lot of those dads, including you today, to tell them thank you. So thank you.
Thank you, Pete.
All right,
Take
pal.
care.
I'll talk to you soon.
Yeah.
Well, I wasn't expecting those kind words from my good friend Eric Segall, but boy, did that feel good. I've reached out to a lot of dads on Father's Day, and a lot reached out to me. It's great. I love talking to other dads about how we can be better fathers to our sons and daughters, or I guess gender non-specific kids, if any of you have any, and just what it's like to try to improve, to try to make up for the mistakes that you make, to try to be effective. Sharing solutions and ideas and watching each other and hearing each other is always a great idea, and I'm always willing and open to having that conversation with you. That's why I like sometimes talking, without really compromising my daughter's privacy, but talking about the issues that I've got as a parent and in my marriage. I don't mind really talking about it publicly, because then people will tell you, I've had that issue and here's how I dealt with it. And that's always useful to me and so many of you as well. So great to talk with Eric again, as always, and always love to talk with him about parenting. Okay, my next guest is one of my favorite commentators. Usually I see her at MSNBC, but I've interviewed her a number of times on the show. I always love talking to her. She's super smart. She is an attorney, a contributor at Essence Magazine, like I said, a legal analyst at MSNBC, as well as SiriusXM quite a bit. Used to join me over there. She's on with Dean Obeidallah a lot. She's the founder of her own law firm, Midwin Charles and Associates. Ladies and gentlemen, MidwinCharles.tv, by the way, and at Midwin Charles on Twitter. Here is our latest conversation. I gave her a call last night.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, how are you?
How are you?
Good. Hanging in there. Just trying to deal with these ridiculous fireworks that are going off these days.
You're in New York and there's fireworks going off.
Yeah, it's ridiculous every night.
I'm pressing record
crazy
right now because I got to hear you vent about this, because I've been criticized in the past for publicly complaining about, I try to separate it. People setting off fireworks in their own personal backyard and stuff. I don't like that. If you're
but this is different. I've lived here for 17 years. Mm-hmm. This is like these loud sonic boom Macy's parade grade level fireworks. Like, that's not how it used to be.
Right. And
it used to be these little cheap, little 2-bit,
right.
cat. You know, I mean, this thing, right? Little cat. This thing sounds like it's Babe Ruth out, like some kind of war zone outside. Like, it's ridiculous.
And how often is it every night?
It's been every night for the past 2 weeks, which is also unusual because usually you get the fireworks start like just 1 week before July 4th weekend.
I don't understand the idea of spending your hard-earned money on fireworks and then exploding things. I don't even get that. I mean,
the kids, the children's, the kids, which is fine. And it used to be like the little, like I said, little cat, fireworks. It was like just a little, Do
you think women ever buy fireworks, or is it exclusively men and boys?
If I had to guess, I'd guess men and boys.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's some women who like that stuff too, but I would guess it's more likely men and boys than girls and women.
Well, then that'd
be my guess.
Have you heard about the research and studies on female police officers and their lack of moving to violence and more likelihood of de-escalating conflict? Have you been reading about that, hearing about that? Do you have experience with that?
Wait, reading what?
That female police officers are far less likely to become violent and far less likely to shoot somebody and more likely to defuse and de-escalate situations.
Oh, wow. I'd love to see the numbers on that. I'd love to see the statistics on that.
An amazing Washington Post article I read last week that had all the statistics in it, and it was mind-blowing.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. I'll search for that and Google that. It wouldn't surprise me because I have seen studies that talk about how when women are involved, for example, in politics, irrespective of which side of the aisle, that they typically tend to come to a resolution more than when you have men on both sides of the aisle trying to come to a resolution, that they're much more conciliatory in terms of trying to resolve the issue.
So I wanted to talk to you about a lot of things, Midwin. We haven't talked in a while. I appreciate you letting me call you tonight. So, how do you see the events of the past few weeks and months? I mean, maybe we can start wherever you think we can start, but the killing of George Floyd, how did you process that, and how different do you think the reaction to his death has been, and what, if anything, do you think is different?
I think, we were talking about this earlier today on our family Zoom call, and I think that the aftermath of George Floyd's death has been promising. It's been about 2 weeks, almost 3 weeks, and people are still protesting. People are still marching in the streets all over the country, from all walks of life, different genders, different racial backgrounds. It's been hopeful for me. And I think the timing of George Floyd's death was sort of the tipping point, right? It was sort of a tipping point because up until George Floyd's death, we had been dealing with incessant bad news about the pandemic, about coronavirus, and how it had devastated Black and Latino communities disproportionately from whites, how the unemployment had disproportionately affected Black people and Latinos, how first responders disproportionately, or essential workers rather, working in grocery stores and deliveries, disproportionately Black and Latino, had to continue working while a more disproportionate number of white people got to be able to stay home and sort of be catered to, or even leave their homes and go someplace else. So we had sort of been marching down this road of just back-to-back incessant news pointing out the disproportionate impact of society's rules and regulations and systemic racism on Black people. Then you have the shooting death of Ahmaud Arbery, who was seen on video jogging, running for his life, and literally being chased by a pickup truck with white men. And it's almost as though you're watching something from the 1920s or 30s.
Yeah.
in the South, and he gets shot with a shotgun. And then you find out that this happened 2 months ago, and that these two men were not arrested, they were not prosecuted, and they didn't even feel the need to try to maybe skip town. It was almost like, we know we're good.
Right,
like
they're
what
protected.
we did, Yeah, that to me was the most chilling aspect of the Ahmaud Arbery case, is that they didn't seem to ever indicate that they were fearful for facing any consequences for what they had done. And that's where we are in America, is that a white person, in many cases, police or some sort of vigilante citizen, can kill a Black person and face no consequences. And I think because of coronavirus, COVID-19, 40 million people unemployed, I think you had an entire country that was, for the most part, at rest. People were home. People weren't busy out running errands, going to the theater, going to the store. People were at rest. And when they were at rest, they turn on the TV, and what do they see? A white police officer pressing his knee against a Black man's neck, who was already handcuffed, with 2 others on the rest of his body, for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. It just, the timing of it could not be more unusual, right? Because we've seen Eric Garner's death was similar, right, in the sense where that police officer choked him out for a period of time. But the fact that I think you have the entire country and even parts of the world at rest because of coronavirus, I think that you had more eyeballs on it. And when you had all this news leading up to George Floyd's death about how Black people in particular have been dealt the short end of the stick on everything, on coronavirus, on
PPE.
On PPE, on unemployment, on essential workers, and even aid from the government, right? We got news that Black-owned companies had missed out on the initial round of money from the government to help save companies. And so it just had been bad news after bad news after bad news. And I think that like what Malcolm Gladwell talks about in his book, The Tipping Point, I just think that George Floyd's death, and then you had Breonna Taylor, of course, in Louisville, Kentucky, where those 3 men have still not been arrested for her death.
I don't understand that. I'm trying to figure that out. I'm trying to find a journalist covering that. But someone said something about the district attorney, the attorney general in charge is like a Mitch McConnell lackey. Have you dug into that? I've been meaning to, as to why those, like, one of the cops just got fired finally, but like that sounds like just an absolutely egregious murder. Mm-hmm. And everybody, every day you see arrest the cops who killed Breonna Taylor, and you're seeing a lot of movement in a lot of other cases and a lot of other districts and states and so on, but that one seems to not really be making progress, and I'm not sure why. I'm just not sure what's going on there.
Because it involves a Black woman. The Black woman was killed, and Black women are the most disrespected people in America. Black women are the most unprotected people in America. Malcolm X said it in the 60s, and he was right then, and he's right now. He's absolutely right now. And it requires a lot more mobilization and a lot more energy to get people to pay attention to these cases, because Black women fall victim to police violence and police brutality as well. But our cases don't get the same amount of attention as the cases for men, which is why Sandra Bland, say her name was the hashtag, that was the slogan, because they weren't saying her name, right? But I have to say I'm hopeful, cautiously optimistic, but I am hopeful, because in the past 3 weeks we have seen new laws and new regulations get passed that activists have been working to pass for years, right? Here in New York, getting rid of Rule 50A, which was a transparency law that prevented people from having access to police officers' disciplinary records. Boom, overnight, that got repealed.
That's huge. So, that's no small thing. Huge. I saw you tweeting about that.
No, not at all. Not at all. And what's huge about it is how hard activists have been working to get rid of that. how many times they have tried to get rid of that with no success, and just overnight it got repealed. You know,
do you see any? Do you see any? It seems like the toughest thing to overcome politically is the police unions. It seems that the police department unions in cities across the country have so much power and have for generations that politicians, even with the best intentions, can't find a way around them. It seems, however, those same police unions are starting to realize that they've got to find ways to compromise. But I don't know if that's really true. Maybe I've just seen a couple instances. How much of an obstacle are those unions, do you think, and how much change do you see them making?
Well, I think they pose a big obstacle because I think city mayors, elected officials have allowed police unions in particular to become too powerful. And they've allowed them to become too powerful from the perspective of dictating how police officers get disciplined and how police officers are held accountable for the bad things that they do, right? Like, I'm a big believer of unions. I've been in unions before. I believe they are necessary for collective bargaining positions, you know, dealing with things like fair pay, overtime, vacation, you know, time and a half. Like, you know, those are the things that you would expect your typical union to play a huge role on behalf of employees. They are necessary. We know that employers are greedy, and without unions, that they would have people working 100 hours a week and pay them $2 a day. You know what I mean?
We see it even in this country in states that are, quote, right to work states. We call them right to work for less states. But yeah, agreed.
Exactly. So unions are very important. I am not in any way knocking any union or any police union whatsoever, but where you sort of have the problem with police unions in particular is how they have sort of stepped beyond the typical role that unions play in terms of making sure that their employees are well compensated, are protected on the job in terms of safety. You know, those are your sort of typical, you know, four corners of a union. But with police unions, they've moved beyond the four corners and gotten more involved in terms of the disciplinary aspect of police officers. And they have gotten themselves into the point where they have entered into contracts with cities or municipalities in which the contracts say that, you know, if a police officer can't be fired, if they have X amount of disciplinary complaints against them, or if they've killed someone, or then it has to be a particular wait period. Like, they've gotten to the point where they have negotiated the disciplinary aspects and the consequences and the accountability of a police officer doing wrong. And they've gone beyond, I think, what you would expect your typical union to do, right? Yeah. Like, think of a union for teachers, or a union for carpenters, or a union for theater, hands, people, stage hands, right? I mean, if you're a stagehand in a theater and a boom mic falls on patrons, you know, the union who represents that employee should not be in the position to be able to dictate to the owner of the theater how to address that harm. Right. Like it's gotten to the point where you have these police unions engaging in a role that pretty much the city or the municipality who hires the police should engage in. Right. And I think that's sort of the problem, and that's pretty much how they've become too powerful. And we have to, I think, cities or municipalities that sort of contract with, you know, do these contracts with police unions, they've got to get away from those provisions in those sort of agreements, because they're choking the municipalities and the cities, and they are unable to have control over the disciplinary actions of police officers. And the city or municipality ends up paying, right? Because when you have these wrongful death cases, lawsuits, because of qualified immunity, the police officer is not on the hook personally. It's the city, it's the municipality. So it's the taxpayer who is coming out of pocket to remedy these wrongs.
So let me ask you about this idea, this phrase, defunding the police. You were on a really impressive panel this weekend on MSNBC, our friend Joy Reid's show, talking about this. It's nuance is dead in this country, and we can talk about why nuance and details matter. But political slogans, usually when the more brief they are, sometimes the more effective they are, one way or another, negatively or positively. And a lot of people think that this the phrase defund the police is not helpful to Democrats. It sounds bad, like you want to, similar to another phrase, is abolish the police. There is a lot of nuance there, though, and I wanted to get your take on how you think, if you think that's an effective slogan.
I actually will approach that question or answer it this way. I don't think it is helpful to be talking about whether a slogan is helpful or not, right? I think the focus ought to be on having a conversation about how can we reimagine, how can we revolutionize the way in which we allow police to deal with problems in our communities. I think that the sort of the framing of, is it the right slogan, I think is a waste of time. Semantics is a waste of time, right? There was a time, there was a time, I remember 4 or 5 years ago, people saying Black Lives Matter was not the right slogan. Right. Because it was exclusionary, why don't you just say Black Lives Matter too? I just think spending time on semantics takes energy away from really trying to address the problem at hand. And the problem at hand right now, when we talk about defunding the police or abolishing the police, is that which are not
new. People should be not at all. These have been around for 30, 40 years or longer in America.
Right. Again, activists have been at the forefront of this for a long time. But the conversation really needs to be about, do we give police too much to do? Here in New York, I remember under the Bloomberg administration, the one thing that I thought he did that was good was he created 311. And 311 was a number that you call for non-emergencies, but for problems that you have, such as these loud, ridiculous damn fireworks that we've been dealing with here in Brooklyn every damn night. Right. You don't need to call an armed police officer to deal with that because it's not an emergency, but you call 311, you lodge your complaint, they give you a number, and they follow up with it. And so the point about defunding the police or abolishing the police is their budget is too expensive. And while we are giving them all of this money and hiring all of these police officers, we do not have adequate enough money going to deal with mental health services. We don't have enough adequate money going to deal with homelessness services. We don't have adequate enough money going to deal with education. And so the theory is, if we would divert some of the resources going to police, we could address some of the problems that are on the streets or problems that will, in the end, require less severe consequences from the police. Like, you wouldn't have to call 911 if you have someone who is mentally ill, who has gone off their meds and is perhaps acting erratically. Rather, we can take the money that we had been giving to police and give it to a group of professionals who are trained to deal with someone who's having a mental health episode, and do so without a firearm, do so without a deadly weapon, right? I mean, I think we can all think of professionals who are trained in de-escalation and are not armed, right? Do you hear that?
I do now. I do now.
It's ridiculous. It's just ridiculous. For example, I have a client who's a nurse and she works on a psychology ward of a hospital. and she is trained to de-escalate situations from some of her patients. She doesn't carry a gun. Nobody's ever died,
Right.
When you think about some teachers are also who probably are working with children who are differently abled. Some of those teachers or guidance counselors are trained in de-escalation and how to deal with those situations. So if we could take money and divert it to those programs and those people, then we can sort of reduce this bloated budget that police have. And I think that's the better conversation to do it. So in other words, we here in New York, we have 911 and we have 311. So maybe we have a 611 for mentally, ill people who are having mental episodes.
There's all different kinds of ways to redistribute the budget that the police department gets and make both police officers' jobs less dangerous and easier by having people who are more well-trained, more qualified to deal with conflict resolution that doesn't necessarily require a hammer for every nail. Exactly,
right? Because as a society, as human beings, we are always going to have disagreements with people. You're always going to have, a situation where your neighbor's playing the music too loud, or the damn kids are popping off these firecrackers. Like, it shouldn't be that we have to call in police officers who are trained to kill, in deadly situations for those minor, non-serious, non-emergency disputes.
Right.
And that really is the conversation that we should be having. Like, I just don't think that talking about whether it's the right slogan is helpful, because it takes energy and focus away from talking about real solutions to get at the problem.
Fair enough.
And I'm also old enough to remember when people thought Black Lives Matter was not the right slogan.
Right.
Slogans will either catch on or they won't. But what's most important is the work behind it. Like, let's talk about the solutions, because we have a problem. We have a serious problem in America. We have a problem where a man is now dead, George Floyd, for allegedly passing a bad $20 bill. Like, that's ridiculous, right? That's ridiculous. Allegedly passing a bad $20 bill, in my opinion, that's a financial crime. How many wealthy people right now are alleged to have committed a financial crime? No cops showed up and put their knees on their neck, right? Just the other day, we had some senators, U.S. senators, who were accused of wrongfully trading stock on the basis of potential confidential information. No police officer, for millions, not a $20 bill, millions. No police officers showed up to their homes and put their knees on their necks and snuffed the life out of them. You know what I mean? So we need to rethink how we dispatch our police. And I don't think it's rocket science, because what I think Black people and Latinos who live in these neighborhoods that are heavily policed are asking for is that their neighborhoods be policed and treated just like the wealthy white suburban neighborhoods are treated.
Right.
So it's not rocket science. So if you can give the benefit of the doubt, if you can exercise discernment, if you can exercise grace in a wealthy white suburb, why can't you do it in a Black neighborhood? Do you really think if a white person had been alleged to pass a $20 bill that white person would be dead today? No. It's not a serious crime. And frankly, we don't even know the full details of that allegation, because George Floyd didn't live to tell us about it. He didn't live to tell us his side of the story. We know very little about that. What does that tell us? It tells us that it wasn't that big of a deal to begin with. You understand what I'm saying?
Yep.
If he was alleged to have attempted to rape someone, attempted to kidnap someone, attempted to break into a home with a shotgun, we would know all the details about that, because those are serious crimes.
Right.
But the mere fact that we know so little about what was the impetus behind those police officers being called tells us that it was no big deal.
Let me ask you about, I want to ask you a political question and a legal question. First of all, a lot of developments at the Supreme Court, decisions coming down in June on Mondays and Thursdays. A lot has happened. Midwin, what do you want to say? Are you surprised about any of these cases, whether it be the LGBT case, the DACA case, the guns case, sanctuary cities? Pick one or two and tell me what your thoughts are, and if you're surprised, and what do you think it means for this court and its makeup?
Oh, listen, I am shocked. I'm stunned. Let's just take the two decisions this week, which was DACA and LGBTQ no longer now having the right to not be discriminated against at work under Title VII of the 1964 Civil Rights Act. I'm shocked. I figured, listen, with the way the court is stacked now, 5 conservative judges, 4 liberal judges, I just figured it's a wrap. Like, we're never going to get a decision that's great or that's helpful. It's been about 3.5, 4 years of horrible decisions from the Supreme Court. And these two decisions were shockers for me, particularly the LGBTQ one, because it was authored by Gorsuch. And Chief Justice John Roberts joined in on it. And you had your 4 liberal judges on it, of course. So that's a 6-3 decision, which is incredibly resounding, right? So it wasn't even close. 6-3 is not close.
Right.
5-4, yeah, that's close. 6-3 is huge. And to have that decision penned by Gorsuch and to have Chief Justice John Roberts join in on it is just like interesting. And then with the DACA decision, that was penned also by Chief Justice John Roberts, joining in with the 4 liberal justices. I think the messages there to Trump, I think specifically, is Chief Justice John Roberts just basically telling Trump, you know what? I'm like, you don't run this court, I do.
Right. Laying down a line.
You don't run this court, I do. But it's a huge win for the LGBTQIA community. I still think it's embarrassing that in 2020, we still have to even be talking about whether it's legal for employers to discriminate against people who are LGBTQIA. Like, America should be ashamed of itself that in 2020 we're still having these conversations.
Well, you say, you're giving John Roberts credit there, but I always feel like every time we give him credit, we need to remind folks that he also is the justice who gutted the Voting Rights Act, which was the landmark achievement of the civil rights movement, Dr. King and John Lewis and so on. And as a result of him with that decision, being the author of that decision, John Roberts, we now see all kinds of horrible hijinks at the polls, specifically most recently in Georgia. So, I mean, that is also going to be part of his legacy. And
absolutely.
Take a long time to correct, if ever.
It will take a long time to correct, and I am not at all dismissing that aspect of his legacy at all.
It sounds like you have a John Roberts statue. That's what it sounded like to me.
No, not at all. Not at all. I'm just saying I'm surprised. 1, surprised, and 2, I think he's having a wake-up moment in terms of recognizing. 1, I think he's also recognizing that history will judge him at some point.
You're right about that. I think you're right about that.
History will judge him at some point. And 2, I also think this is messaging to Trump, which is because Trump talks like he owns the Supreme Court. Mm-hmm. He has politicized the Supreme Court. He's like, we have the courts. And, at one point, I remember Chief Justice Roberts, maybe about a year ago, had said that, the court is not to be politicized. It's not a Democratic court or a Republican court. So he had always been sensitive about Trump's perspective of what the Supreme Court means or what the Supreme Court is. And so I wonder if these two decisions was Chief Justice John Roberts, who swore me in, by the way, because I'm admitted to practice before the Supreme Court.
Right.
Yeah, he swore me in 2006.
That's interesting.
And I mean, I've never argued a case before that, but I am authorized to do so.
That's how it works. That's cool.
Yeah. And I think that these decisions are sort of messaging to
Yeah,
Trump.
it's maybe he's getting that message because remember Trump, even though he tried to not remember anything he says or tweets, he tweeted, "I'm starting to think the Supreme Court doesn't like me." Last week he tweeted that.
Just so first grade. I'm like, I can't without. I really can't.
Yeah.
I've blocked all of his tweets on my feed. Yeah, it's the best ever. I was getting anxiety every time I would see.
Yeah, you could be having a good moment, a good hour, a good afternoon.
Because every time I saw one of his tweets, it would give me anxiety on two levels. One, the actual content of the tweet. But then there'd be another level of anxiety, which would be, I can't believe this is how far down we've fallen as a country. So it was like a double layer of anxiety.
Yeah, it was like a short-term reaction and a longer-term in the aggregate. This is how bad it's gotten in a more macro sense. Yeah.
Right. And sometimes how bad it's gotten would sadden me more.
Yeah.
Than what he was actually saying.
Yeah,
right?
No, I think that's a great way to frame it. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. It was almost like, okay, so in his tweet right now, he's saying he's taunting, Kim Jong-un, which is really dangerous and could, launch World War III and blah, blah, blah. But then on top of that, you have that extra layer of anxiety that says, I can't believe this is the president of the United States. And this is how elementary he is. And this is how cavalier he is in talking about a world leader. Like there's that whole level of like, I can't believe this is where we are anxiety. And it was too much for me. And so not only would I see his tweet, and I never even followed it, but I'd see other people tweeting it and retweeting it. And I said, I don't want that. I don't want to see it. So I can't see any of his tweets and I love it. The only way I could see it is if someone screenshots it.
Let me ask you. Yeah, I hear you. I think that's all pretty healthy mental choice. I think more people probably need to make a similar choice or get away from social media for a longer period of time. That certainly made a big difference to me. I have whole gaps throughout my day where I don't look at anything, and
that's smart.
Yeah, it's been really helpful to me. I go outside, believe it or not. So I also just wanted to ask you the kind of political question about what happened on Friday night with the firing of the Attorney General, the Southern District of New York, and what you think of all of that. I've been talking about that on the show today as well, because I think that's a really important development. And I think that I saw you tweeting about being critical of Democrats on the Judiciary Committee and others for not, maybe potentially impeaching him or holding him responsible. I think it was Jerry Nadler who was saying something that you were rejecting. But what are your thoughts? Like, how do you frame how momentous that move by Barr was? And it may just be there's kind of some speculation that Trump didn't even know that he was protecting Trump without Trump even asking him, which would be probably even worse.
Yeah, I think I wish more people would understand how dangerous what Barr is doing right now, and I think a lot of people don't get it because most people are not lawyers. Most people don't recognize that this is really the beginnings. Like if anyone studies how democracies fall, if anyone studies how fascism comes into being or authoritarian regimes, the first thing that usually happens in a country is you have I can't even say it.
I'm going to go for it. Delegitimization of.
There you go. Delegitimization of law enforcement. And so basically what happens is you basically put someone in charge who is now the right arm or the left arm of the authoritarian, and that person does their bidding. And they control all investigations. They control all legal levers. So you basically control the judiciary. Do you hear that?
I hear those fireworks. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah. And I have my earbuds in, which typically reduces background noise.
So annoying.
Yeah. And so what Barr did is that's so dangerous is we're supposed to have an independent judiciary. That is typically the hallmark of a democracy. Because if you have an independent judiciary, then it has credibility. Then people can trust it. People can rely on it. But when you have someone like Barr stepping in and doing things like, dropping the charges against Roger Stone, firing the Attorney General of the Southern District of New York, which was specifically looking into investigations that directly impacted Donald Trump, such as Deutsche Bank, the Trump organization. Like, there are ongoing investigations, many of which we're probably not even aware of. We're aware of the Deutsche Bank one. We're aware of some others, but there are probably others that we're not aware of.
Right.
And to have Bill Barr step in and try to fire the guy who's currently doing that and put in another person to do it who's never litigated. He's coming in from the SEC. He's not only has he never litigated, but he's never even done criminal cases before, to run the Southern District of New York, which is one of the most, some people say prestigious, but I would say they tend to handle some of the most important litigation in all of the country because they are seated in New York, which is where a lot of the financial crimes tend to happen,
right,
and so on and so forth. So people say it's prestigious. It's more or less that they tend to handle a lot of important cases. And so to put someone in there who's incompetent, who's not qualified, which is like we've seen has sort of been a hallmark of this administration, and for the sole purpose of looking out for Donald Trump's interests, you no longer have an independent legal department. Instead, what you have is just the politicization. I can't say my words today. The politicization of the Department of Justice, and so now it's like no one can trust the Department of Justice, and this is not what the Attorney General is supposed to be doing. The Attorney General is not supposed to be running around town protecting the President of the United States. They are supposed to be operating at an arm's distance. They are supposed to be independent. Remember when Republicans lost their minds when Loretta Lynch, the Attorney General under Barack Obama, met briefly with Bill Clinton on the tarmac? They lost their, oh my God, this is so inappropriate. Yep. Hillary's being investigated. How dare you be with her husband? They nearly self-combust. Here you have the Attorney General literally stepping in and doing things on behalf of Donald Trump as though he were his own personal attorney, and crickets from Republicans.
Right.
Meanwhile, you have a country that is in crisis in terms of police killings of unarmed citizens. This is where the Department of Justice is supposed to shine. It is their job. He's the top law enforcement person in the United States. They're supposed to be opening up investigations against these police officers and the police department. They haven't been doing that. You see rampant voter suppression, the violation of voting rights of Black Americans happening throughout the country. Where is the Department of Justice looking into investigations in this? This Department of Justice under Donald Trump has not opened up one case under the Voting Rights Act.
Is that right?
Not one. Not one.
I didn't know that.
Not one.
That's crazy.
Not one. Not one. And when Jeff Sessions was Attorney General, he basically, on behalf of the Department of Justice, pulled out of all of the consent decrees that were in place. Yeah. So as for your listeners, one of the things that the Department of Justice does in police brutality cases or civil rights abuse cases is they will investigate a specific police department and say, listen, we believe you should put these measures in place to make your police department better. And you are going to enter into a consent decree that is under the auspices or under the authority of a court order. So you have to follow it. Otherwise, you'll be in violation of a court order. And you should put these specific mechanisms in place to ensure the safety of people so that you whatever. And a few, I'd say about maybe 12 police departments were under these consent decrees and making progress in trying to better their police department. Jeff Sessions came in and said, we're pulling out of those consent decrees. We don't need them anymore. And
then a lot of people forget this, but then Jeff Sessions appointed Boss Hogg to be his deputy and Roscoe Pico Train from the Dukes of Hazzard. And I think that was something. Remember that show? Did you ever watch that show?
Dukes of Hazzard?
We were talking about TV show the first time you were on the show. Remember, Blair Underwood finally acknowledged you. That was pretty sweet.
Yes, thanks to you.
We were
Wasn't that
talking
awesome?
about L.A. Law and him being the inspiration.
Yeah.
But that's about.
For
I feel
me to
like
be a lawyer.
just a few years
Yeah.
before that, I was watching Dukes of Hazzard, which was like about a Southern corrupt cop. Anyway, Boss Hog. Wouldn't be surprising. Well,
but
that's a really important development. I did not know about that.
Yeah, but what Barr is doing is incredibly dangerous because this is what dictators do. This is exactly what dictators do. Is, they have their henchmen and their henchmen go in and fix cases for them, quash all investigations into their wrongdoing. And this is how corruption is able to thrive. And then they go after and punish their rivals. Right. Like you see, Lindsey Graham has said that he's going to open an investigation into Obama era people who opened up the Russia investigation. This is basically the hallmark of a dictatorship. This is it. This is what dictators do.
And it's not in isolation. There's all of the hallmarks of a dictatorship, according to experts on authoritarianism, a number of which I've talked to and read, obviously, have been screaming from the mountaintops that this is what it looks like.
Yeah, and so to me, I think it is a dereliction of duty for Jerry Nadler, chair of the Judiciary Committee in the House, to say that he's not going to, at the very least, open up an inquiry into what Barr is doing, because he's like, oh, the Senate will never convict. We have an election coming up. I'm like, but since when does doing your job require, why does doing your job require waiting on or hoping that the other person will do their job? Like that should not be the predicate for you to do your job.
Well said.
Yeah. Like they have a job to do, and that job is oversight. You can't abandon your job because of what you think someone else might or might not do. What are you talking about?
Yeah, look at what Republicans did to Eric Holder.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, they
went after him like with the jugular.
Yep.
Day in, day out. That man could not breathe.
On a lot of bullshit, too, on things that everybody's just like, what are you doing? There was no,
exactly.
Come on now.
How many Benghazi hearings did we have? How many?
Yep.
How many times did Republicans try to repeal the Affordable Care Act, even when they knew they would never get the vote? Persistence matters. Accountability matters. They have to do it, and they have to establish the record. Yeah, because you know what, we're gonna look back 10 years from now, and Jerry Nadler is gonna be in the hot seat. Well, why didn't you go after Barr? Oh, because I just didn't think the Senate would convict. What? What kind of dumb shit is that? I mean, that's just ridiculous.
Yeah, no, I agree with you.
It just doesn't make sense, and it's a dereliction of duty. What are you afraid of? Just do that shit.
Midwin Charles on Twitter. I appreciate you spending time with me on a Sunday night during the fireworks.
You're welcome.
It's always great to talk to you. I love seeing everything that you're tweeting at Midwin Charles on Twitter and watch on TV, and go to midwincharles.tv, your website. Always great when you join me. Thank you so much.
You are most welcome. Thank you.
Isn't she great? Love Midwin. Hate fireworks. Hate residential fireworks. You've heard me rant about them. It's very divisive here on the show. Some of you are with me. Some of you think I'm really out of line and too sensitive, and you love your fireworks. I understand. In a divided nation, yet just another dividing issue. Fireworks. Why do you have to do them so early and at your house and early in the year, just any time randomly? Every time I hear fireworks going off, I'm like, what are they celebrating? How come I wasn't invited? Okay, sorry. All right, now joining me for the final conversation of today's show is my dad, and as usual, a little bit of my mom in the background. My dad is the man of steel in many ways. He has been injured many times in his life, from accidents and fights and athletic events. He's a competitive cyclist and a ski instructor, and used to play a lot of softball, and he has been hurt a lot, but he always comes back. And this past October, he had a heart attack. And then as a result of the heart attack, he got blood thinners, and he fell and injured his eye and lost vision after 2 surgeries in his eye. So he can't even see out of his right eye. But the guy just keeps going. Nothing stops him, and he is, for that and other reasons, someone I look up to a great deal. And, of course, my mom, amazing as always in the background here. But I went through a timeline of my dad's injuries, and I just thought this would be fun. Hopefully you'll enjoy this. Happy Father's Day to all the dads out there. I know Father's Day is over, but I love being a dad along with you. So keep in touch. Let's keep sharing ideas, what works, what doesn't. All right, here now, my conversation with my dad about a timeline of his injuries and accidents. Enjoy.
Hello.
Hello.
Peter.
Yes.
I'm playing pool with Ava.
Oh. Well, you have an appointment with me.
Well, you set the appointment. I didn't set the appointment. You did.
Yeah.
Let's get this done.
All right.
Here we go.
Wait a minute. I gotta tell Ava that I gotta talk to you. So I gotta swap. Hang on. Hello.
Hello.
All right.
Happy Father's Day.
Oh, it is. I got Ava on hold. I thought I hung up on her.
Oh, don't worry about her. She'll be fine.
Call ended. Oh, she's my granddaughter, Pete. Take it easy.
Let's do this.
No, wait a minute. Where's my notes? Oh, here they
Happy
are.
Father's Day. On today's episode, we're going to check in with my dad, and we're going to go over some of his injury and accident history. And you were supposed to send me a copy of your injuries and accidents.
Oh, I didn't know that. I could send it to you.
So I can go through, so I can know where to start.
Well, you could start when I was 3 years old.
True or false? You've broken
True.
every bone in your entire body.
No, it's not true.
Why not? What bone did you not break?
No, I'm not. No, I'm very superstitious, so I would never say that. I would never say a bone I didn't break.
Oh, okay. Well, I actually didn't realize you were superstitious.
Oh yeah, very much so.
First time I've ever heard of that.
Well, it's not the kind of thing a man brags about, you know.
All right, well, I don't know what bone you didn't break, but it seems like it's all of them.
No, I didn't break
All right,
all
when
my.
you were 3,
Yep,
what happened?
I was riding my tricycle in the road,
Mm-hmm.
and it was all broken up. It was all stones, and I hit a stone, and I went over the handlebars on my tricycle and put a rock right through my upper lip.
Mm.
That's why I had that scar on my lip.
To this day.
Still there. Yes, it is.
It's also why you grew a mustache.
Yes.
Cover the
Your
scar.
mother. Yes, it's true. It's true.
What was the reaction? You don't remember anything because you were 3. You don't have any memories of that.
I remember it. They took me to the doctor. The lady, next door neighbor, picked me up and carried me over. I was bleeding all over the place. They took me to the hospital, the doctor there back in those days, and he put his finger right through the hole. It went all the way through. Yeah. Yes. My parents told me I was screaming like a stuck pig, I was bleeding all over the place. So yeah, that was a bad scene. Very traumatic. Very traumatic.
Yeah. They had doctors back then?
Yeah. I went to this hospital. It was like a guy's house. That was the hospital.
Right.
Dr. Vernoy, the hospital. Yeah.
All right. That was 3 years old. What's next?
Well, I broke my nose a couple of times in fights, getting in fights.
What ages did you get in fights?
Like 16, 17, 18, something like that.
You got punched in the face at all those years and broke your nose that many times in your teen years?
Well, a couple of times, yeah. Yeah.
What were those fights about?
Well, one of them was over
You
a
were
girl.
a little guy. What are you doing getting in fights?
Well, when you're a little guy back then, and if there were bullies, there's like today they have bullies. We had bullies back then. And if there was a bully, you better stand up to him or you were going to have a miserable childhood. So, I just didn't, I had to stop it. I couldn't just let people bully me. So I would fight them. And usually I'd lose, but you get a little respect that way.
Yeah.
Because you weren't afraid of them.
And any of those fights, you came home with a broken nose, and your parents.
Couple of them, yeah. Yeah, they weren't happy about it.
Good God. That sounds. You make it sound like it was common, but.
Well, there were fights. People got in fights back then.
Yeah. Anything in particular about any of those fights that you recall why they? It's the kind of thing you don't forget, really.
Well, I don't remember all my fights, but I mean, there was one time I was at, we went to the Valley Field days, and this, I was going out with this girl, and I guess this other guy thought it was his girlfriend or something. There would seem to be a little miscommunication there.
Oh,
and
dear.
he walked through the crowd. He was known as a tough guy.
Yeah.
He walked right up to me and punched me in the nose and broke my nose. Yeah.
Did you
so
get
we got in a big fight right there, and the cops came and everything. It was one of those deals. Yeah.
Did you get a couple licks in, or?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. Yep. That was the last fight that he and I ever had.
Oh.
Yep. She never went out with him again either. I mean, it's not like, it's not like he won the girl back, that didn't happen. So.
Okay. So that's your teen years. You got in fist fights with people where more than once you had your nose broken?
Yeah. Twice, I think. Yeah.
Boy. Okay.
Okay.
What was your brother during this time?
Where was he?
The guy who would stick up for you, your younger brother. Was he ever involved?
Well, we were brother. Yeah, we had a couple of incidents. Yeah. Oh yeah. Yep. And when somebody, it was one time in particular, somebody picking on him, so I just punched him. I just don't pick on my brother, and got ended that in a hurry.
Huh.
Yeah.
All right. So that's your teen years. And then will you go into your late teens and you get more fights, or?
No. Try to not do that anymore.
Well, what was your next injury?
I wrote these down.
Okay.
So I broke my hand while I was working on my car. I broke my hand. I was about probably 19 or 20.
What happened?
I got mad and hit the wall. So I broke the fifth metacarpal.
Something happened while you were fixing the car, which made you angry, and you punched the wall?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Boy.
Yeah.
What do you remember? What happened that caused you to do that? Or?
No, but that was
You don't remember?
I would call that. No, I call that my stupid injury.
Oh.
Because what's more stupid than hitting a wall with your fist? I mean,
what were the other ones prior to this referred to as? More noble.
I didn't give them names, but this one I gave a name to because that was my stupid injury.
Yeah, that's a dumb one to injure yourself.
Now, do you remember when I had? Let me see. Oh, the next one. You weren't around for this one.
Yeah.
I had a motorcycle, and you could ride it off road, and I went over the handlebars and broke my elbow, my right elbow, because I couldn't write too good. You
were with mom at this point?
Well, she wasn't there, if that's what you mean, but we were together. Yes.
You were dating?
No, actually, we were married then when that happened.
How did she react?
Well, she didn't. She was upset that I hurt my elbow. She's
worried about you.
Very sympathetic.
She was sympathetic.
Oh, there she is.
Yep, I'm here.
Were you
She's
upset?
been practicing bird calls.
Oh boy.
Why have not?
You got new bird calls, Mom, for the folks, people listening.
Yeah.
They're pretty big hit.
She's been working on a couple of them, and she's working.
I got one subscriber said he'd up his monthly subscription if your mother would do a weekly bird call show.
Yeah.
I'm going to start practicing.
Yeah. So anyway, did she give you grief for the?
No.
She didn't say don't be riding a motorcycle around is for children.
No.
Everything.
No.
What kind of motorcycle did you have?
It was a Kawasaki.
Okay.
Little dirt bike.
So you went over the handlebars on a motorcycle?
Well, yeah, it's in the mud and everything. I must have hit something. And
doesn't seem like a very skilled rider. No offense. Not that I could ride it.
I don't think I was very skilled. No, I never said that. No.
Okay.
Do you remember when I had the concussion grass skiing?
I don't remember it. It was. I've heard stories about it, which sometimes make you think that you remember it, but I don't think I remember it. So this is a good. This is where it gets really good. Not that it hasn't been fantastic so far. But this injury is epic, I think, because you were doing something called grass skiing.
Yeah, they had these like rollers and
like tank tracks.
Yes,
people could look it up. Look up grass skiing. They don't have it anymore.
I don't think so. It's pretty dangerous.
Yeah.
and it's stupid. It was really stupid. I mean,
I just looked it up, and it said grass skiing is exactly like skiing, only really dumb. Literally, that's what it says.
Yeah, I would describe it the same way. Yeah. Yes, because ski areas, for the most part, it's not like you're skiing on grass skiing would be okay on a golf course, but not at a ski area because ski areas are not groomed, for grass. There are a lot of stones and gravel. So I hit something and I fell, but nobody had a helmet. There was no such thing as a ski helmet back then, and it hadn't been invented yet. So we were skiing just out with the shorts and ski poles, and I fell and whacked my head and had a concussion. And they took me out in an ambulance, right, honey?
Yes, and we followed in that big old Lincoln we had, and you boys were making the noise of the sirens.
Yeah, you were having a ball.
So Dad was in an ambulance, and you were driving the big old Lincoln with Brian and I in it, and we were making ambulance noises?
Yes.
Yeah, you used to watch Emergency One on TV, so you thought that was a big deal.
Because we watched Emergency One.
Right.
Huh.
Yeah.
How worried were you, Mom?
Oh, I don't know.
On a scale of 1 to 10, how worried were you?
I don't remember.
When Brian and I were making...
Make it a scale of 1 to 5, then that should be easier.
All right, I was worried.
When Brian and I were making siren sounds, how did you respond to that? Was that fine?
I probably told you to be quiet. I was probably nervous.
Here's the emergency.
I
think I found the Emergency One soundtrack. Let's see if I can get this to play. Oh, no.
That's it.
Remember this?
Yeah.
Here they are.
Yep.
Here it gets good.
Yep. That's it.
That was Brian and I in the back seat.
Yep. That's you guys in the back seat. Standing up, probably.
Yeah. There you go. All right.
Did you hear what I just said about you falling asleep standing up in the backseat of that big Lincoln?
No.
That thing was huge. It was a 4-door Lincoln and suicide doors, and we turned around. You were sleeping standing up in the back of the car after skiing one day. All right, so the next one, let's see, motorcycle elbow. Then I had the concussion grass skiing. Then, this was a bad one. I broke my leg playing softball.
Oh, yeah. Now I remember this.
Yeah, I was a catcher, and they threw the ball to me, and I tagged the guy out sliding into home plate, and he broke my leg because my spikes were mired in mud. And
he slid right into your tibia, your lower leg bone.
Yes, and he broke my tibia. Yeah.
Now,
I had 2 surgeries to fix that. Yeah.
My recollection was you were angry at that fella for sliding.
No, it was one of those things, but, I wasn't happy about it. No, it was...
My recollection is that Papa was angry at your father.
My grandfather, your dad, was upset with you. Why?
Yeah, he came over and he says, "What are you doing? A grown man playing games like that. You got kids and you got responsibility.
Well, that's just seems a little hypocritical. Didn't he play professional ball?
Well, it's not hypocritical because when he got married, he quit playing.
Oh,
so it was consistent with his reasoning.
Got it.
And he was not hypocritical about anything. Believe me. Then, do you remember this?
Well, hold on a second. You got this guy. You were playing catcher at softball, and in your early 30s, I guess.
It was 1983. So I was about I was almost 40, something like that.
And this guy slid in the home. You're playing catch, and he slid right in your lane. They took you away in an ambulance, or?
Yeah, they did. They had to. Yeah.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
So this is the ambulance ride number 2?
No, I don't. Probably 2. Yeah.
Let me just write that down.
Yeah.
Okay. And then you had surgery, and what they do? They fixed your bone.
The leg wasn't healing right, so I had surgery. They put a big plate in there. It was like a big steel bar with 9 screws. Like looked like big wood screws back then. They're smaller now. I keep that stuff, but but they're now they use titanium. Back then they were stainless steel. It was huge.
You
and
keep
then I had
the hardware that was used inside your body to repair your body.
Yeah,
is that what that box of metal is in your garage that looks like it could build the skyrise?
Well, it's pretty heavy duty bar.
There's an I-beam in there, I think.
Yes, and it was so then they took it out. So it was.
Didn't you like sue one of the doctors or something like
that? I should have, but I didn't. No, because he screwed up. Yeah, that's just another story. I mean, he didn't set the leg right, so it messed it up. Yeah.
Yeah, I know you got that big scar on your shin for that one. I remember that one.
Yeah, I got 2 of them. Yeah,
you couldn't go through a metal detector, I think, for a while.
There was no metal detectors to go through.
Oh, I thought there was an issue with that. All right. Well, you were trying to move on. What do you got next?
Yeah. Well, the next one is my fishing accident. Fishing? Now you were there. You were there when this happened. Remember, we used to go fishing up in Onondaga Lake for carp.
Yes.
And we walked out on this pier of rocks, and I was with you, and I fell, and my hand went in between the 2 big rocks, and I broke the same bone that I broke working on my car. The 5th metacarpal. I broke it at the same bone. So we finished fishing that day, and then I went home and had another broken bone.
We got done fishing, and you went home, and then when you went to the hospital?
No, I knew what it was. There was no reason I just took care of it.
You never got that looked at?
There was nothing to look at. I knew what it was. So
it was like the kind of thing you would go get checked out.
Maybe I did. I don't know. I got an X-ray and they say your bone's broken. Yeah, well, I knew that. So they don't do it. They didn't do anything for it. You just wrap it up, I think.
Okay, so moving on. You broke your hand falling while we were fishing.
That was my fishing injury. Then I took up mountain biking for a while, and I was going down this. There was a path where they had all of the power lines, and I hit a big rock and went over the handlebars on my bicycle and broke my left collarbone. Mountain biking. I quit mountain biking shortly after that.
That was it. I remember that. I remember that one.
Yeah, I wasn't crazy about mountain biking after that. And then 10 weeks later, I went up to Waterville Valley and for a ski racing clinic, and we were doing our last run of the clinic. A couple of days, of that, and probably skied I don't know how many gates, hundreds of gates, and with 2 gates to go, I hooked a tip on my ski and broke the same collarbone again 10 weeks later. So
somehow I don't remember that.
Yeah, well, I drove home from Waterville Valley, which was like a 9-hour drive with a broken collarbone.
Good God, Dad.
Yeah.
Alone?
No. I had a friend with me, but it was easier for me to drive because I had that big old Dodge Ram truck.
Oh, I remember that thing.
I could rest my elbow on the elbow rest there. It's my left, so I could drive the car, and it was more comfortable for me to drive, so I drove home.
All right. Well, that's the same collarbone twice within a year. That's pretty horrendous.
Within 10 weeks, yeah.
Say within 10 weeks.
Yeah.
Okay. What's next?
ACL injury when I was skiing in out in Utah. I tore up my ACL.
Skiing in Utah, you ripped your knee ligament up.
Yeah. Yep.
That required surgery.
Yeah. My buddy operated on me for that, and then he took the hardware out after, and I got the hardware. Kept that.
Why do you keep it?
As a reminder of things I shouldn't be doing.
Oh, doesn't seem very effective.
No. Then the last one was the when I was it a little over a year ago when I fell for, I don't know why I fell. I was skiing again, and I broke my tibia plateau, the meniscus, and my MCL. And my buddy, as you well know, Dan, operated on me again, and the knees are fine. The knees are 100%. I kept the hardware that way too.
Last February, your ski season ended when you broke your leg again.
Last turn I ever made on skis. That's what happened.
Yeah.
Tragic. Yeah. And that's then I tore tendons in my thumbs. I think at least 3 times that I know of, that I remember. And I had a lot of bicycle crashes, but on the road racing, or usually in races, but never broke anything. Just a lot of road rash from that.
Which is where your skin comes off.
Yeah, that's more painful.
But how many times did you have bicycle accidents?
I don't know. There was a lot of races, a lot of years, so probably 4 or 5, I guess. I don't know.
Remember that one time where you dragged your bike across a guy's car hood?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's one of those incidents. I still hadn't matured yet. Now I've matured. I've matured now. Grown up.
Now you've also
no more.
So that's it. Is that the whole thing?
Yeah, that's it. That's all of them.
How many surgeries do you think you've had in your life?
Oh my gosh, I probably, I don't know, 6, 8, 10,
over 20.
No, I don't know. Probably 12 or 15. I don't know. I really don't know. I don't know.
And is there anything that you would change about any of it?
Oh, I'd change everything. Oh yeah. Anything I'd change, sure.
Wait, what would you have done differently?
I would have bought just to give you an idea.
Yeah, I was I was sure we'd end it right there, where you would have just been like, nope, not a thing. Wouldn't change a thing.
No, for instance, the tricycle. Let's go back to the first one. I would get a larger front tire on my tricycle, so it wouldn't happen.
Well, so you're going to go through every one of them now and change.
Well,
something.
I would change. You asked me. I'm telling you.
I would have moved before that guy slid in the home.
Yeah,
I would have never grass skied.
I broke my nose. That guy that punched me because I was dating that girl.
Yep.
No, I wouldn't have changed that one. I would still date her. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The one where I broke my hand working on a car, that was the stupid break.
Dumb,
dumb. I don't think I would go grass skiing again. I wouldn't do that again today.
Right.
And I would change a lot of stuff. The skiing injuries, that's with me, it's part of the deal. So no, I wouldn't change any of that.
Right.
Nah.
All right. Well, on that note,
I wouldn't go mountain biking anymore either.
Right.
I guess I would change that. Yeah.
Right.
And I would. That's the most part. I would still. I wish I could still race my bicycle. I can't do that anymore. I'm too old.
Mm.
Yeah.
He's not going to get any more broken bones or injuries.
No, your mother says no more. Mom's worn out.
I understand that.
And Dan, my surgeon, is going to retire pretty soon, so I got to be careful.
My surgeon is going to retire. I better be careful.
He's my best friend.
He's the last one.
Yeah.
The last guy out there that I can operate on the Man of Steel.
Well, I wouldn't call it Man of Steel. More like a lot of miscellaneous parts. So how'd this go? You think this is worth?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's fun.
And I seriously, on a more serious note, I mean this. I have been working on your mom to do more bird sounds.
Yeah.
That's not, I really am doing that. I've been pushing her, and we go out in the yard and we just sit and wait for a bird. And I say, "Can you do that bird?"
Yeah.
And she's working on it. So
you ever feel like the birds are just showing off, like making a show of things when they just won't shut the hell up?
They can be very annoying.
Yeah.
So when you put it that way, maybe they are just trying to annoy you. I don't know, Pete. I never really thought about
Sometimes
it.
I just feel like they're showing off. They're like, over here, 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 over here.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ, we get it. I mean, shut the company over here.
Yeah.
All right, Mom, do you want to play us out with anybody?
Do I want to play you out with anybody?
What does that mean? Play us out. What is it?
Like music, but instead it's just mom making bird noises.
No, not really.
You're good.
No, do one, honey. Come on. Do the Blue Jay. Do the Blue Jay.
Like,
I think that's a crow. I think that might be a crow.
That was a crow.
All right. Happy Father's Day. Love you. Bye.
Yeah, I love you too.
One more, Mom. All right. Thank you.
Really embarrassing.
No, it's fine. Everybody loves it. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
All right, another great conversation with my dad, and thank you for all of those of you who listened to all of today's show, all of the guests, Michael Cohen, Boston Globe, Professor Eric Segall, Georgia State University, lawyer Midwin Charles, and of course, my mom and dad. That's all I've got for today's episode 131. Looking forward to the rest of the week. Let me know who you'd like to hear, what you'd like to talk about, what you'd like to learn, and I will find someone that can teach us. Thank you so much for your support, your paid subscription if you haven't signed up yet. As little as $5. Go to the paid subscription link in the show notes, or just go to patreon.com/Pete Dominick. And no, you are not alone. Someone has experienced something similar to what you've gone through. Probably wasn't me, but I'm happy to connect with you, talk with you about it, and to try to make it real that you're not alone, because I love you, and there's so many amazing people out there in this audience, this community that we have built together over the years. Thank you. I will talk to you tomorrow right here on the Stand Up with Pete Dominick podcast. Tell your friends.